Wired Differently. Leveraging Your Favors on Fulcrum Principles. Written by Todd Saylor. Narrated by Russell Newton. Fulcrum 1. The Mind. Success is a condition, not a position. Todd Saylor. The year was 2008. This country was in the middle of a prolonged and ruinous recession. Businesses were going bankrupt left and right. People were scared to spend money. And that was my world as a salesman. Starting and growing a company in normal circumstances was tough enough. In this environment, it was like dragging huge boulders uphill. I've always been someone unsettled with life. It's not that I'm ungrateful for what I have, nor is it that I'm greedy and insatiable. My state of mind is that ideas are always coming to me. I look at something and tell myself this can be made better. And it's not enough for me to think of these ideas. I have to put them into action, now. Each success becomes a step for the next level, then that level becomes the next step, and so on. I'd started my company PayServ in 2003, but it wasn't growing fast enough. In fact, the risk, the pressure, and the looming fact that we leveraged everything to grow this idea weighed increasingly heavily. So, coupled with the challenges of the recession and my struggle to realize my dreams, the pressure got to me. I was always wound up. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't relax. I was a prisoner of my unpredictable mood swings. My health suffered. My personal and professional relationships suffered. My business suffered. Considering my constant time crunch and the whack-a-mole financial environment, I needed to be in top form, but I was far from it. My physician diagnosed that I suffered from depression and prescribed Wellbutrin. I was aware of the irony. I thought of myself as physically and mentally tough. I prided myself with cultivating the kind of attitude that could bulldoze its way through any obstacle. I regarded myself as a strong man with a spiritual center. My family and close friends were a staff for me to lean on, and here I was, taking drugs, finding solace in pills that rattle in a plastic bottle. But my mind was thrashing like a wounded animal. I needed help. For a while, the Wellbutrin helped my mood swings level out. But though I could sleep, I wasn't functioning well. My brain acted like it was out of adjustment, and my body dragged itself through the day. I hated it. The outward me still had to keep my business running. I still had customers to manage and prospective clients to woo and close. The pressure of sales never let up. It wouldn't just be me who failed, but also my business and my relationships. I returned to my doctor for advice and help. He took me off the Wellbutrin and replaced it with Ambien. I could now sleep, but Ambien's side effects proved to be worse than Wellbutrin's. I would sleepwalk, come to in dangerous situations, and have no idea what I was doing. I once found myself in the middle of the night at a rental unit, trying to hook up a gas line. Most of the day, I was in a fog and sometimes hallucinating. And always my mind and body felt like they'd been through an emotional wringer. The pressures of sales kept mounting and mounting. My pain was quite real. It was like ants were gnawing at the inside of my skull at times, and my muscles and joints ached pretty much non-stop. I returned to my doctor. He wrote prescriptions of one type and another for the pain and to help me sleep, but I quickly realized that the doctor's drugs were not enough to resolve my anxiety and stress. My life was completely out of balance, and worse, I was weak, dull, and drifting. I was pulling away from what I had to be: alert, strong, energetic, virile. Internally, I was a mess. I harbored no illusions of where I stood, precariously on the brink of my own destruction. Rock bottom was certainly imaginable in this state of mind, and I was, admittedly, frustrated and scared as to where my mind was taking me. Then I regrouped. I was here because I'd let my mind drift. If I truly wanted to save myself, I had to tame my mind. I was in a bad situation, but I wouldn't let that define me. My condition was that I had the power to correct for my drift. I realized that my mood swings, my anxiety, were the imbalance that each of us has in our lives. Not only is it normal, but some of us have it more than others. It's part of being wired differently. Acknowledging this, I rallied my mind and set myself to correct my drift. I turned away from the drugs. Instead, I meditated, I prayed, I exercised aggressively, I ate well. I forced myself to keep a mindful, healthful routine, and to attend to my relationships, and push those negative thoughts away by literally saying the word cancel when they hit my brain. I got through it. As you can see, for a while, my land of quo was a bad place to be. To fix my life, I was willing to stretch my mind, which meant doing things that made me uncomfortable. And to accomplish this, I had to get outside of my land of quo. This is very important, to realize that we are all different. We all have these moments of thought compromises. They're normal and dangerous, and I encourage you to push through it. Don't stay in those moments. Change your actions. Change your routine. Don't allow your mind to wallow in negativity. Shout "cancel" at the top of your lungs and move on immediately. For you to get outside your land of quo, let's look at my opening quote. Success is a condition, not a position. In what I related in my story, my positions as founder and president of my company didn't mean much considering my condition, which at the time wasn't good. You can't define success by a title on a business card. Life is dynamic, even turbulent. The drift is constant. To correct for that drift, to achieve success, we must first discuss the fulcrum of the mind, the most important of all the fulcrums because everything starts with your mind. How your mind conceptualizes the world and reacts to events determines your behavior. In other words, how your mind works determines how you will act, and how you act determines how you live. How, then, do you get your mind to think about getting success? You do so by conditioning your mind to take action that moves you in that direction. We're familiar with the training regimen of athletes. They drill incessantly to toughen their bodies, obviously, but equally important, to condition their minds so that their reaction to a given situation is automatic. They do the reps. I keep stressing that I'm wired differently, but in truth, we all are. In my case, what I mean is that my mind is wired in a way that made me reject the status quo and, in turn, brought me to formulate my ideas of favor, inventory, fulcrum, leverage, and land of quo. To better understand my concept of being wired differently, imagine your mind as an electric motor. What powers the motor is the electric current flowing through wires wrapped around magnets. The manner and the number of times a wire is wrapped around the magnets will increase the force that spins the shaft. Now imagine that conditioning your mind is like wrapping wire around the magnets of an electric motor. The more times you wrap that wire, meaning the more times you condition your mind, the more powerful the motor. But sloppy conditioning, like sloppy wiring, won't produce the results you want. You have to be deliberate and attentive in the manner you condition your mind. How do you rewire the mind? You do it by acting upon your favors. You learn when to apply them. You make acting upon these favors a habit. You do the reps. Let's step back a minute and discuss what keeps us from acting on what we want. I'll tell you exactly what it is. Fear. We humans are wired to avoid fear. This is something primal within us, which is why we feel discomfort and anxiety when experiencing fear. A major source of fear is change. We avoid fear because we prefer to remain comfortable and feeling safe. But being wired differently pushes us to extremes. As human, mood swings are part of our DNA. It's who we are. We're meant to be out of balance. This state is what causes us to continually reach forward, to never be satisfied with what we have. It's what drives progress and growth. To not move forward is to decay and stagnate. So, we have this tension between wanting to feel comfortable and being continuously out of balance. This tension is what causes us to drift. To remain comfortable is to remain within the boundaries of our land of quo. If we want more out of life, then to expand those boundaries, we have to change our land of quo, and this change brings fear. There's uncertainty about our status, our well-being, and our future. If we want to get ahead, to achieve success, then we must be willing to confront our fears, acknowledge them, and embrace change. We beat fear by conditioning our minds. We channel this tension, this anxiety brought on by change, by doing the reps of exercising one's favor. We identify and pursue those activities that will rewire our mind so that we exhibit the behavior we need to reach success and correct for the drift. To get success, you must ask, what do I want? What is required? Achieving success means you have to move out of your land of quo. You must be willing to make yourself uncomfortable. In doing this, you acknowledge that you're wired differently. Lessons that we learn as we grow up condition our mind and set our default about how we think. Knowing that our experiences as kids shaped us, then why, as adults, are we not willing to condition our minds to go places that are necessary for us to grow? To get to those places, we must avoid taking the path of least resistance simply because it's more comfortable. We need to recognize and counteract the drift. As a young man, I learned that to get ahead, I had to act upon my positive attitude and inventory my favors to identify my strengths and, just as importantly, my weaknesses. 4 of my strengths were work ethic. I understood the value of hard work and applying myself. Compassion. I had concern for how my actions affected others. Competitiveness. I pushed myself to succeed and beat the other guy. Committed. If I was going to do something, I'd see it through to the end. Some of my weaknesses were wanting to be liked. I was afraid of standing my ground or voicing an opinion that wasn't popular. Wanting to please. My self-worth depended on others giving me a pat on the head. My fear of public performance. How can the recognition of a weakness become a favor? Because you've identified that something you're doing or not doing is holding you back. To address that weakness, you must identify a specific action that will gain you an advantage. But take heart, others you're competing against share the same weakness, but people seldom take measures to overcome it. Recall that I mentioned in the glossary that a confronted weakness is a favor forward. You have the opportunity to either turn that weakness into a strength or to compensate with your other strengths to make up the difference. Overcoming a weakness involves change. It involves rewiring your mind. You may hate the idea of change, but to get ahead, you must embrace change because change is a constant of life. Even if you do nothing, the world around you changes. The challenge is to direct change in a direction that brings you success. To show how I overcame a weakness, let's see how I got past my fear of public performance. I hated the idea of giving speeches, but I knew if I wanted to be a leader, I'd have to get out in front of a crowd and do so in public. Faced with that realization, I did the most uncool thing a standout school athlete would think of doing, which was, I signed up for band and drama. In this way, I was confronting a weakness, and by doing so, I was building a favor that I could leverage in the future. Among my circle of football buddies, my new interests were a one-way ticket to dorkdom. Band and a school play would definitely be venturing far outside my land of quo. I'd be putting myself in one uncomfortable situation after another. Moreover, I was very competitive, and I knew I wasn't going to be number one in band or drama. But that's not what motivated me. What drove me was overcoming this dread of doing something uncomfortable, while at the same time cultivating the confidence to perform in public. In other words, rewiring my mind to exploit this new challenge. In band, I started with the trumpet at last chair and stayed last chair, but the band instructor liked me because I worked hard. Seeing that I wasn't getting any better on the trumpet, he told me, "I got a spot for you. We don't have anyone playing the French horn." So I switched to the French horn. Then a new girl came in, and though she didn't know a thing about the French horn, after day 3, she could play better than me, and there I was again, last chair. However, even when compared to my mediocre reputation in band, my experience with drama was more lackluster. I kept at it throughout my adult life, performing skits for the church, having fun, and all the while honing my communication skills, doing the reps. I realized to be a good actor, you have to own the part without reservation, and that's key to being a good salesman or leader. How far are you willing to commit? What's the distance you're willing to go to deliver a convincing performance and actually fight out of the land of quo? Looking back on my decisions to join band and perform in a school play, what I'd done, though I didn't realize it at the time, was that I was embracing change. If there's one constant we must embrace in any enterprise, that constant is change. I acknowledged change when I was advancing through the school system and taking advantage of the opportunities available to me. For me to succeed in life, I had to be more than an accomplished athlete. I needed more skills. I needed more favors. For me to gain those favors, I had to step outside my land of quo. I knew I had to somehow separate myself from others and avoid the herd mentality. What holds us back is fear. In middle and high school, the fears I faced when deciding on drama and band were ridicule from my peers and the discomfort of doing something I wasn't good at. What no one else saw that I did was a vision of myself as a leader, and to be an effective leader, I had to be more than an athlete. I needed those public speaking skills. Moreover, change means discomfort, and I had to toughen myself, not to back away from change, but to embrace it, to exploit it, to do the reps and rewire my mind, to correct for the drift. As much as I loved football and sports, much of what I am now is the result of working in my family's donut shop. My dad's salary as a member of the school faculty, teaching health and PE, and as a football coach barely covered the family expenses. To bring more money to the household, during the summer he and my mother owned a shop, Tom's Donuts, and they ran from a trailer at the Lake James Resort near Angola, Indiana. Just like in football, I was at my father's side in the donut shop. From the age of 5, I was standing on a crate so I could reach into the sink and wash dishes. Under my dad's watchful eye, I helped prepare the dough and learned how to make a great donut. It was messy, hard work, and I returned home covered head to toe in flour. I made a lot of donuts. I mean, like, lots of donuts. One July 4th, I made almost 9,000 donuts in one morning. I also performed hours of back-breaking labor, scraping floors and keeping the place clean. When I was 13 years old, I didn't hesitate to ride my bike to the shop at 2 a.m. to get the fryer started and begin the baking process. I saw how dedicated my parents were in making the shop a success and appreciated the distances they were willing to go to make sure our family was taken care of. This experience wired my mind to realize that excellence, execution, and the team mattered both on the field and in the business. Without question, I did as my parents asked, and I absorbed the lesson that a strong work ethic did pay dividends, another favor that I placed in my inventory. Plus, the responsibilities added to my sense of self-worth, because I realized what I did was important. There were consequences, both good and bad, for what I did and for what I failed to do. In between sports and working in the donut shop, I rarely had a free weekend until I was 21. That commitment and the money I earned carried me through college, and I kept up that grueling schedule throughout my days as a student. I played football, and for my performance as a split end, I was rewarded All-American honors and an induction to the Hall of Fame at Manchester University. To get that far, what I'd done was leverage my tenacity, what I call my distance favor. Like any other football player, I dreamed of the opportunity to play professional football, though it was a long shot, even at best. I was actually invited to try out for the Detroit Lions, but ruptured my disc during the last game with Manchester. Although I completed that game with 11 record-breaking catches, the effort capped my football career, and I was unable to pursue the invitation to the Lions. It didn't help that I was ridiculously slow. Though I've been blessed with many great football memories, I still draw on the camaraderie of the huddles and the experiences and special feeling you get from competing and playing in high school and college sports programs. It was definitely a shaping and defining favor that reinforced how I was wired differently. Another episode that shows how I was wired differently happened much later in life. Anna Maria Island, Florida, 2009. It was a perfectly warm and sunny late spring afternoon. While my football playing days were behind me, I remained a dedicated athlete by competing in grueling triathlons. I was starting my triathlon training for the day, specifically reverse tri-training involving brick intervals, which are a series of 5-minute sprints where you bike, then run, bike, then run. Bricks strengthen your muscles and keep them from cramping as you transition rapidly from activity to activity. When I finished with the bricks, I continued the training session by doing the Olympic distances in reverse order to shake up the muscles, the 7-mile run first, then the 26-mile bike ride, and end with the 1-mile swim. After I was done biking, I parked it on the north side of the Longboat Key Bridge. Ready for my swim, I dove into the calm and welcoming waters of the bay. As I swam parallel to the beach, I felt weak and like I was pulling an extraordinarily heavy weight. After swimming for about 10 minutes, I checked my position against the shoreline and realized I hadn't made much progress. Plus, I was farther out in the bay than I wanted to be. At first, I decided that since I was swimming at the end of my workout and not at the beginning as usual, I was especially tired. Fatigue and sickness set in, so I decided to make my way back to where I had left my bike. But as I turned around, something strange happened. The swimming became easy, yet I was being pulled out to the middle of the bay. The tranquil surface of the water masked a powerful riptide that was dragging me out to deep water. I was caught in a real-world example of the drift. Furiously, I swam harder, but my legs were shot, my stomach seized, and my shoulders cramped painfully. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my bike resting on the beach, useless in my plight. The riptide was funneling to the bridge, and if I got sucked under it, I'd be slung out to sea into the Gulf of Mexico, never to be found again. 100 yards away, a group of fishermen worked the beach, and I cried out to them for help. But they either didn't hear me or misunderstood my predicament, or were unable to come to my rescue. I went under the water. When my head bobbed free, I again called out for help. Then, when my head went under for the second time, I realized the seriousness of my dilemma. I had to think my way through this problem, but when your body is locked up and you're on the verge of drowning, it's almost impossible to string thoughts together. For the third time, my head cleared the water, and I managed to scream in terror. Everything was out of my control. It's strange to explain, but I could actually feel the realness of how close death truly was. In that moment, I went down for the last time and sank. Suddenly, I touched the rocky bottom. It was in that moment that I rewired my mind. My first thought, never give up. My second, to survive, I had to do something different. My legs were useless. My stomach was in an agonizing knot, and though my arms lacked the strength to swim, they could haul me over the rocks. Rather than swim, I would crawl through the tide to safety. So, rock by rock, my lungs screeching for air, I crawled relentlessly toward the shallow water, head bobbing, legs wobbling, way past the point of exhaustion, lungs heaving sweet, refreshing air. At last I gazed at the fishermen standing along the shore. They in turn looked at me as if I were some sort of sea reptile that had washed up on the shore. Numbed by my ordeal, I made my way to my bike. I slowly mounted it. As I pedaled the 2 miles home, I remained somber and numb as I pondered what had happened, that I was close to never returning home, that it was a miracle that I survived, and how. I regarded this brush with death as a metaphor for everything that I espoused about drift and rewiring your mind. Had I not recognized that I was being pulled out to deep water, I would have found myself totally lost in that land of quo. And when I committed to an alternative course of action, that is, turning around and swimming to safety, and finding that didn't work, I had to seize on something drastic that would save me. In this case, crawling underwater along the rocky bottom. Hopefully your experience in the land of quo won't be as life-threatening as that example. The takeaway is, the more you drift, the harder it will be to get to where you want to be. Along the way, you'll find yourself deciding to do something different, the need to rewire your mind. It's your mind that controls how you react. Understand that your success is a condition, not a position, and that condition is your commitment to move out of your land of quo, knowing that everything starts with the mind. How is the condition of your mind? This has been Wired Differently, Leveraging Your Favors on Fulcrum Principles, written by Todd Saylor, narrated by Russell Newton. Copyright 2019 by Todd Saylor. Production copyright by Todd Saylor.